Labor's Senator John Faulkner this week said Labor's power brokers were strangling the party.
Factions are now more focused on internal power rather than policy development.
Well, Kevin Rudd may be off on his frolic overseas, but he did find time to tweet that he couldn't agree more. Now, on our panel today are two long-time party power brokers, the Liberals' Michael Kroger and former New South Wales Labor Minister John Della Bosca. John, you're from the infamous New South Wales Right, a power broker. Do you feel responsible, as John Faulkner and Kevin Rudd seem to suggest, for Labor's decline, its lack of ideas?
Well, look, I think everybody's got to take some responsibility for where the Labor Party finds itself in regard to some of these organisational issues and some of the other political issues that are well-rehearsed concerns now, starting in my own state. But look, I think, John Faulkner and Kevin Rudd remind me a little bit of Claude Rains in Casablanca. They're collecting their winnings or they're closing down the casino. I mean, the reality is that the way in which the party has worked for a long, long time has been the way in which John Faulkner described it. And I think one of the most valuable observations he makes is that factions, the party organisation has ceased to be about ideas, or is much less about ideas than about power itself.
But Michael, it seems to me that in part that the criticism misses the real problem. I think Labor has got ideas, they're the wrong ideas. Global warming in particular, and the boat people issue, which I think it's done in defiance of the polls, not in conformity to them.
Well, as Lewis Carroll said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, and that's the problem with the modern Labor Party. But look, John Faulkner's speech, I must say, was very disappointing. Political party membership in the Western world, Italy, Germany, France, England, Australia, has dropped by 2/3 in the last 20 years. This is a worldwide phenomenon. Faulkner doesn't even mention that. We've got to do the same amount with a lot less people, and there are lots of reasons for that which we won't go into today. The second thing is, since the decline of communism and the narrowing of the ideological divide, people aren't as passionate about their politics as they used to be. And so in the 70s, we had, hundreds of people from the Baltic states join the Liberal Party in opposition to the Whitlam government's Soviet recognition of the takeover of the Baltic states. So what you're seeing is, with a narrowing of the divide, is less passionate about politics. I mean, I joined the Liberal Party in the 70s, as did Costello, Abbott, Abetz, Campbell, Santoor and a whole range of others, because we were anti-communists. No one joins the Liberal Party today because they're an anti-communist.
Yeah, but on the other hand, plenty of people are engaged in politics over global warming, aren't they? I mean, I think the passion's there. That's not the problem, is it?
And quite a few people joined the Labor Party in the 70s because they're anti-communist as well.
But not enough.
But look, I think what we call core values, do change from, people have well-rehearsed argument about the foundational Labor Party contained, the stamping of Chinese furniture, a complete ban on Asian immigration and a whole range of things that people would find an absolute anathema now. So I think, these ideas around constant values change and in many respects for the reasons Michael's already briefly touched on. I think the other point that's absolutely critical here is that, Labor parties, to a certain extent, change, by their success, bring about a change which lessens that passion. Yeah. So as you get a better, more equal society, and I suppose Liberal Party, people would argue that elements of the Liberal Party's success also have contributed to this, and I think it would be true, that both parties have contributed to a more consensual society, a more democratic society, and there is less passion, there is less difference between the parties, and we seek to find differences in relatively small policy concerns.
Well, I think global warming is a big issue rather than a small one, but I wonder whether this is really the explanation for Labor's diabolical problems at the moment. It seems to me that if you look at the federal sphere, what's really killing it is not so much the lack of ideas. As I said, it's the wrong ideas and also the bungling. Take the exports of cattle to Indonesia. That seems to me a policy that's been disastrously handled. Look,
I think the live exports debate is more interesting from the point of view that we've had a caucus backbench revolt. You interviewed a colleague just before myself about this, and I think the key point here is, and it's a sad thing to say from a Labor Party point of view, why on live cattle exports? I think live cattle exports is an interesting issue. It's obviously a big concern to a large number of people, and I'm not saying humane treatment of animals isn't important, But compared to issues around refugees, compared to a range of other issues around education and other social policy areas, disability, something I'm very concerned about, where are the voices, where's the dissent, where are the people prepared to break ranks there? That's
Spot
what worries
on.
me.
The people were dying at sea, and all these people jumping up and down now said nothing about the policies that are luring them to their deaths. Michael, Tony Abbott today in Nauru, looking at the facilities there. Let's have a look at what he said he was going there for.
So I think it's very important that I satisfy myself that the facility at Nauru can be reopened swiftly.
Do you think this is a winner for Tony Abbott?
Well, it certainly is, but all of the votes which the coalition have got on this issue, they got at the last election. I don't think there's much more in terms of the electorate that is going to help us at the next election. So all those seats we won in Queensland, the Northern Territory, those areas, Western Australia, those areas are most concerned about this issue. They've already gone to the coalition. I think Labor's stocks in this policy area are pretty low, and this Malaysian solution, it's a panicked solution, half-baked. Make these announcements when these policies are not ready.
This is weeks on, it's still not signed.
This is one of the problems. This government seems to be in permanent policy crisis, Andrew. You rush out and make this announcement. Why they had to make it on the eve of the budget, just to get something out there, and it's not even signed. There's so many problems with it. The government just can't seem to get anything right from a policy sense, and that's their biggest problem.
You must despair at this cack-handedness, John.
Oh, well, it's not for me to despair. I look upon, I look at this and think that there's some real reasons to be concerned about the way the government's proceeding. I think this goes in part back to the Parliament. You've got a Prime Minister and the executive of the government always looking towards, not just looking for the one political party's backbench, but they're looking to satisfy three political parties' backbenches, the Independents, the Labor Party and the Greens. That's not something, strictly speaking, of Julia Gillard's making. It's a decision she made to put together that coalition to continue in government. Having made that decision, I think there are things we have to live with, and some of those things include policies being developed in a way which are not as considered and not as well developed as they might otherwise be in a majority government.
That's putting it extremely mildly, I would have thought. Look, the thing too is, Michael, while you're right, I think, that there are not too many extra votes to win for the Liberal Party, I think this whole issue of boat people is delegitimising the Labor position to the point where you've got refugee activists like Marion Lay now almost recanting and saying that the former positions of the Howard government that they abhorred are actually better than what Labor's now putting through. Have a look at this.
To reopen Nauru would be a retrograde step, but I think it would be far better than just continuing along the way that we're going at the moment.
It's that delitimisation, thank you for that word, of the Labor Party. I think that's killing it.
Labor's moral capital on this and so many other issues, Andrew, is just being exhausted. I mean, Labor was meant to be, as I grew up, I was told, this is the party of compassion. Well, on this issue, even its strongest supporters, even the most fervent opponents of the Howard government's Pacific solution are basically saying they prefer that to Gillard's solution. But this is typical of Gillard on so many issues. There's no belief, there's no principle. It's just we've got a problem, try and do something about it, even if it's half-baked. And this, global warming, so many issues. This government's it's run out of political capital, and it's certainly run out of moral capital. And I think she's in a deep funk, a deep crisis, from which I don't think she can recover personally.
Too strong, John?
Oh, look, I think it's too early to declare that the government's finished. It's a year in. The new paradigm's exhausted itself, and obviously the government needs to renew itself again if they're going to have a serious prospect of, one, regaining popular confidence, and two, getting anywhere near where they need to be by the time of the next polls. But it is 2 years away. It's a cliched thing to say, but it's true. I think what needs to happen is that the government needs to, following the point that Michael made, the government needs to re-establish a moral criteria. Frankly, at the moment, I can't see my way through the point at which they've got themselves in a refugee policy. I can't see my way through that. I think that that policy is deeply concerning, the way that's been handled. Obviously, there are many people who feel the same way in the Labor Party and right across the community. So I think the government needs to establish a number of other policy issues.
It is a nightmare. John de la Bosque, Michael Kroger, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks.
Lovely.
Thanks, Andrew.
And coming up, celebrity manager Max Markson on the strange selling of the Dalai Lama.